Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Lunch Hour Live here at the Boston Public Radio at the Newsfeed Cafe. I'm Sue O'Connell, thrilled to be with you for another edition this week. Oh, such a special interview with a great program that's been airing on PBS this week. It's a Frontline. It's called America's Great Divide, From Obama to Trump. And joining me is Micheal Kirk, the filmmaker of this great new program, which you can obviously, it was on Monday and Tuesday, but you can watch it at the appropriate websites and all over the world, as we can do now on your phone, on your watch.
Streaming 24/7.
Micheal, thanks so much for coming in. Great to meet you. Want to remind folks at home or at the library, if you have questions for us or comments, you can send them via the Facebook or the Twitter machines, or just raise your hand here at the library. Someone will come over and take your comment. Give me an overview. What is this great two-part series about?
So as in my experience of the last 40 or so years, I won't say exactly how long, of covering national politics, I really think 2020 is the most important, the most critical, at least so far in my life, presidential election coming up. Country deeply divided, a very controversial president, deeply siloed and argumentative Democratic Party going to yield a candidate to come up against him. And I just thought, let's create the overture before the curtain goes up on this opera that is the American division. And so we went back, tried to identify where it really took off as a problem, that is division. We decided on the beginning of the Obama presidency, and to try to explain what happened over, let's say, the last decade or 11 or 12 years. And that was what we decided to do. It turned out to be 4 hours. It could have been 40 hours.
Absolutely.
And thank goodness for the existence of public broadcasting, because we could get the airtime, get the primetime airtime 2 nights in a row. And it is a great testament to Frontline and their decision making that they said, okay, let's do it.
It's a stunning moment, I think, for those of us who were adults during the Obama administration, to realize that we're already at a spot where we're looking back historically with the viewpoint of history, right? With the ability to see now things that we didn't see as they were happening for what was happening. What was something in that you cover in America's Great Divide that happened in the Obama administration that we missed while it was happening live?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience. I made, I think, 8 films during the Obama presidency, so I knew the people, I knew the material, I knew what the big events were, but of course, even if you have 4 hours to make something, you really can't do all of them. Also, it did feel a little bit like Obama himself was in the rearview mirror, but I wasn't exactly sure how. So the early research yielded a very important thing, which is the people who worked for Obama in close and might have talked to us off the record while we were making all those films, had now written books or had now come out, and Obama himself had just enough time to be in relief and therefore available to all of them were available to talk about it in a way. And in that conversation, things I thought I knew and understood and knew sort of intellectually suddenly became emotional compared to what's happening with Donald Trump, unique in the sense that nothing that I knew about that had happened before had happened. And a lot of it around Obama centered on race and the relationship of his African-American positions and posture and color of his skin and everything else compared to what we had all thought. We knew that birtherism had risen up. We knew that there had been problems with the beer summit, that there had been problems with Trayvon Martin and Ferguson and all of that, but I hadn't really understood the extent to which it represented something fundamental about him and the color of his skin. It also represented something really fundamental about America and about the divide.
It also, we're talking about the beer summit, which was something that happened here in the Boston area, in Cambridge, when Professor Gates was stopped on his front porch by police. Barack Obama intervened in a sense and said, let's come down to the White House and have a beer and just talk it out with the police officer and with Professor Gates. And of course, the birtherism being the challenge to Barack Obama's legitimate American citizenry here and being born in the United States. But it also seems that Barack Obama was always in some sort of box, right? And almost whichever door he chose, he was going to find himself in a difficult situation regarding how he was or was not dealing with race.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that happened because of the Cambridge police officer and Professor Gates, that when Obama said the Cambridge police reacted stupidly, saying the word stupidly and police in the same sentence by the first African-American president of the United States lit such a firestorm, lit it up. And Ben Rhodes told us, one of his closest aides, said to us, his ratings dropped more as a result of that statement. That tells you everything you need to know about race in America, I think. Not everything you need to know, but everything you need to know about how intense it is. That statement, boom, he plummets right in his ratings, and that's just astonishing to me. And I hadn't really thought about it.
Well, I hadn't either. And watching your show, over the years, I've talked to a number of police officers, and over the recent years, talked to a number of Trump supporters. And I often say to Trump supporters, you know, he's completely disrespecting the FBI. Regardless of what you think about Jim Comey, the way he treated him is disrespectful. To me, he's disrespectful to the Secret Service, it appears to me, that support him. If you're a law enforcement officer, would you not be insulted by the way that President Trump seems to be treating law enforcement officers? And almost to a one, they would say to me, yeah, but he's not holding a beer summit.
Wow.
And until I saw Frontline, I thought that this was just some individual bubble that I was living in. But that was a catastrophic moment in some ways for race relations in this country.
Well, see, that's what I mean, and that's what I didn't really fully understand, and it's why we did 4 or 5 big sequences that are the arc of his own discovery of how to act and how to do it. And by the time he's in Charleston and he sings Amazing Grace, it is this sort of, and speaks before it in this amazing speech that he's never delivered before. There is, people tell me when they watch the film, this sense from them of where was that guy for the last 8 years when that moment happens. But it is a culminating moment, and I think we spent a lot of time with it in the film because it does become sort of central to what happened with him.
I'm talking with Micheal Kirk, the filmmaker of America's Great Divide, From Obama to Trump, which is on Frontline. You're watching Lunch Hour Live. We're going to take a look at a clip right here on Lunch Hour Live.
I remember when Barack Obama got the call that he was going to make the keynote speech at the Democratic Convention in 2004. And as soon as he hung up the phone, he turned to me and he said, I know what I want to say. I want to tell my story as part of the larger American story.
He delivered the speech of his life.
Thank you. Tonight is a particular honor for me because, let's face it, my presence on this stage is pretty unlikely. My father was a foreign student, born and raised in a small village in Kenya. My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation.
The idea of Barack Obama being unique in so many ways, unique with his funny name, unique with his skin color, unique with his message that, look, I'm not a creature of Washington, I'm new, I'm just showing up. I'm willing to work across the aisle.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
He was a star. That we hadn't seen a politician like that before. Not in recent history. He's gonna tell it like it is. And, you know, you can believe in what he says. And he doesn't seem to be so wrapped up in this partisan divide.
Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you.
He was gonna be the one who was gonna try to heal that wound.
Barack Obama arrived with a promise of unity.
Yes, we can heal this nation.
But his presidency would usher in an age of unprecedented anger,
Afro-Leninism.
resentment, political conflict,
The Republicans messed up so bad.
polarization. A turning point in America's Great Divide.
Speaking with Micheal Kirk, filmmaker of America's Great Divide. So I'm struck by this idea of unifiers. You know, I think the day after George Washington was sworn in, right? You know, the founders didn't want political parties. The founders didn't want Republicans and Democrats and Republican Democrats. They just wanted this country to be laid out flatly without silos so that everyone could vote. And then, you know, within a heartbeat, the next candidacy after George Washington, we suddenly had political parties.
Right.
You know, has there ever been a moment in this country where we haven't been deeply divided? You know, we clearly are now. We clearly have been after the Civil War. We clearly were during the civil rights battles. I'm been through the marriage equality wars here in Massachusetts, where it seemed that families were being torn apart. I mean, are we more divided now?
Well, it's a question I ask. First, it was a question we ask ourselves on my team. We came to the conclusion after the nearly 20 films that we've made on about the two men, that it's about as intense as we've ever experienced it in our a bubble as journalists back and forth to Washington. But it's something I ask everybody, almost everybody that we interviewed, and we interviewed a lot of people for this film, in long interviews, hour interviews, 2-hour interviews. And to a person, they all expressed this idea that yes, there was the Civil War, yes, there was the Depression. We've, as Americans, fought like cats and dogs about all kinds of things, but that there's always been a kind of shared common understanding, a positive view of the future, that no matter what, America would prevail in some way, and rightly or wrongly, a sort of sense that America was a nice place and we were nice people, that we would help people in the world, Europe during World War II, famine, flood, earthquake responses, that's who we were. And the question that a lot of people, or the answer that a lot of people gave me, which just shocks me even to think about now, is they don't think Americans could come together on a common understanding of institutions, FBI, Justice Department, the underpinnings of our democracy, and who we are as a people in just the most simple way. And are we optimistic, Democrats and Republicans, are we optimistic that we can come together and go forward into the future in a kind of positive way? You're not finding that in any of the polls that you see, and you're certainly not finding it in Washington when you get as close as I have been since the beginning of Obama's administration, and really going back to Bush as well.
There seems to be a burden of failure that I don't think other generations have felt in the same way, you know, and I think to your point, I know when I was a younger person and my family would talk about the environment or talk about any problem, I thought we'd be able to fix it. Right, I had an optimism that Americans would fix it,
Right.
And even if I was cynical about who would fix it or who would make money off it, I thought it would get fixed. And when you talk to young adults now, that optimism just, even in any sort of form, cynical or not, just doesn't seem to be there.
Well, and not just young adults,
Right,
boomers,
right.
everybody, right? But it's the young who have to fix it, who
Yep.
will have to carry forward with a kind of hopeful optimism. And you're right about that, too. I don't see that happening.
We're taking your questions on Facebook and Twitter. If you're here at the Boston Public Library at the Newsfeed Cafe, just raise your hand. We'll come on over and take your question. You know, the film makes a great point about Sarah Palin, which again is something experienced, didn't see it that way, and now I can't unsee it, right? So how important is Sarah Palin in this, her contribution to the divide that we're in right now?
I think one of the things, one of the first questions I asked David Axelrod, for example, one of Obama's top advisors during the campaign as they were running, did you recognize that there was a Sarah Palin cohort out there? Did you recognize that there was this like a bog fire burning in America under the surface, and that Sarah Palin was in fact the match that may have lit that? And Axelrod freely says, I'm not sure we understood the extent to which people were, that there was an anger out there. It's Frank Luntz, a great Republican pollster, and a guy who understands how it works inside the Republican Party, said it was a shock to him to discover it. Sarah Palin becomes the sort of precursor of Trump in a lot of fundamental ways. And he's a smart enough man who from the sidelines was thinking about getting into politics anyway, who recognized when he saw her and he saw what was waking up out there, even more than a lot of Democrats did, he thought, oh, okay, and how is she getting there? She's getting there with straight talk. She's getting there by pushing the anger button, the fear button, the anti-elite button, the anti-press button, many, many things that Donald Trump, themes that Donald Trump surrounded himself with, dealt with, still deals with, in relation to talking to that base out there. They were all woken up and brought into the fold by Sarah Palin.
I'll never forget the debate, the vice presidential debate with Joe Biden and Sarah Palin, when the first thing she says to him when she comes on stage is, "Can I call you Joe?" And I remember thinking, this is like a whole new world we're in right now, you know.
Right.
All right, we have a question from a member of our audience here at the Boston Public Library. How difficult was it to get interviews with Megyn Kelly, Republican operatives, Axelrod, all the folks that you've been talking to in this film?
Well, if you were just to go out and try to do it, it would probably be really hard. The really good news is Frontline has been investing in me and our company and our kind of films for a long time, for 30 years. And we have built over decades relationships with Washington people, both sides of the aisle. We try very hard to go down the middle on this kind of material. I think we have their trust as that we'll deal with what they say fairly. We do a thing called the Transparency Project, where every single interview that we get is published in full on the website, and you can even see the parts where we took the words that are used in the sound in the interviews.
Yeah, so people may not know what the sort of the filmmaking magic and the television magic is. You might sit down and talk to someone for 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours.
Right.
You may only use a couple of minutes of that interview in your film, in your documentary, in your television program. But you actually just open up the doors and say, here's the entire interview. Here's what we chose, so that, you know, we all have biases, we all have points of view. Someone can actually see where you were going with that, right?
Well, and especially the people who did the interview.
Right.
They can look and they can say,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you know, he and they were really contextualizing what I said. They let me say what I said. They dealt with it fairly. There wasn't, I'm not a gotcha interviewer. I'm not out to say, now I have proof that you're lying to me. I try to extract from people their best version of their story, and my job on behalf of the viewers and the audience is to put that next to somebody else and some narration and some serious research so that it's all in a kind of historical context.
And that voice, the voice. You need the frontline
You
voice.
gotta have
that.
Will
All right,
Lyman.
so
Will Lyman, the greatest narrator there is.
another question from the audience. How did you pick out, or how do you pick out central themes or how did you pick out central themes, in both films? Does that happen after your interviews? So
No, everything, I'm a coward. I would not go out and spend the people's money from Frontline just randomly shooting interviews. I have to know what I'm after. And I work very closely with a really great team of people, Mike Weiser, Jim Gilmore, Gabrielle Chandra, Phil Bennett. We all the producers, we all read everything we can and then construct a sort of narrative, deciding that in the case of both of these films, there are sort of 16 critical moments that happened during Obama's time and 16 critical moments that happened during Trump's time. Not everything that happened could fit into those 4 hours, but those key moments begin in interviews with what are the stakes for this moment, economic dislocation, do we fund the banks or don't we? What are the stakes for the presidency in the country, and what are the results from what the decision was that the president made? And we did that and applied that standard to everything, and that's how we decide who to interview and what to ask them about.
another point you just brought up, which also was enlightening to me, and again, something I can't unsee, is how Barack Obama and the administration dealt with the banking crisis, which at my cocktail narratives, narrative is he saved the nation. We might have lost our house, but we're still on central footing. But there was a whole other level of stuff that was going on there that was in plain sight, but just unnoted.
The effect of the economic dislocation of millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans, as a result of the bank failures in September of 2008, is completely, I think in some ways, misunderstood by Obama when he takes over. And then suddenly, inside of his own group, there is this desire. Let's get some scalps. Let's close down a bank. Let's get into what they called Old Testament justice, and let's punish some of these Wall Street people. And yet, his Secretary of the Treasury, Tim Geithner, said, "Yeah, that's great political theater, but the fact is, hundreds of millions of Americans' lives are being affected. If we go down into the financial abyss and America goes down and the world goes down, that's your responsibility, Mr. President." And Obama, who is himself personally very conservative about how dramatic he feels about, no drama Obama, is a true philosophy of his.
Dr. Spock, Mr. Spock rather, not Dr. Maybe Dr. Spock and Mr. Spock.
Anyway, he basically chooses the banks over the other. And what he doesn't realize, but what happens is the Tea Party grows out of that, out of the right, and the progressive left deserts him as well. They're completely done with him. And it feels to a lot of people in America like, here we go again, the same old kind of politician from the elite, was a Harvard Law School graduate and, lawyer from Chicago, and here we go. Well,
Yeah, suddenly not Barry from the block anymore. Suddenly he's part of the institutional problem. We're going to look at another clip of America's Great Divide from Obama to Trump. I'm talking with Micheal Kirk. Take a look.
For some people, the ultimate goal in life has been becoming the President of the United States. Would you like to be the President of the United States?
I really don't believe I would run it, but I would like to see somebody as the President who could do the job.
Why wouldn't someone like yourself run for political office? You have all the money that you possibly need. You've accomplished a great deal, even though you are only 34. Why wouldn't you dedicate yourself to public service?
Because I think it's a very mean life. I would love and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life, and I also see it as somebody with strong views and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular, wouldn't necessarily have a chance of getting elected against somebody with no great brain but a big smile. And that's a sad commentary for the political process.
Over the decades, as Donald Trump watched and waited, the prospect of becoming president would grow, just as the nation was becoming more and more divided.
It is time to heal America.
Bill Clinton ran against brain-dead politics in both parties.
And a leader must be a uniter, not a divider.
George W. Bush said he was a uniter, not a divider.
We are and always will be the United States of America.
Barack Obama was introduced to the country saying there's not a blue America and a red America. And each of them, by the end of their presidency, the country was more divided than when they took office.
It was in that division that Trump saw his moment.
He was looking for an opportunity, and his opportunity was division. His opportunity was mining resentment and weaponized race, and that's what he did.
This is a classic case of the time being right for a Trump candidacy. Now you have a level of dissatisfaction with the voters that we've never seen before, and they want somebody with the toughness and the independence, and nobody can bully him. He's viewed by voters as his own man, who will tell it like it is, whether it's politically correct or not.
I am your voice.
An age of unprecedented anger, resentment, political conflict, polarization had arrived. And with it, Donald Trump.
Crazed lunatics, the Democrats.
Ready and willing to stoke America's great divide.
So I'm from Revere here in Massachusetts, which is one of the few towns in Massachusetts that predominantly voted for Donald Trump in the election. And when I go back home and meet with my high school friends to plan our upcoming 40th reunion, when we talk to folks that I grew up with, they tell me they voted for Donald Trump, and I say, why did you vote for Donald Trump? And one woman said it to me so succinctly. She just said, because I feel like he's the type of guy that if I was walking in a parking lot and I didn't feel safe and I saw him, I would feel safe because he would be a bully for me. And, you know, the film kind of captures that essence.
That's exactly right. This is a man who, despite the fact that none of his biography would indicate that people like the people in Revere would like him.
Or that he would actually hit anybody for you.
Well, you never know. He certainly would have somebody else hit somebody for you. It's an interesting thing, the calculation he makes, and when he makes it. And it's true that what we say in the film is right about him. He was watching and waiting for a moment of conflict and trouble in America, and he stepped into it. And intentionally, they're not running from this. They say, Obama says he's a uniter, but we were more divided than ever. I'm a divider because that's what people do in a democracy. They fight. That's how the democracy should work.
Right, he didn't invent this at all. He just
he's the
recognized it and then put it back out there.
100% the beneficiary, says somebody in the film, of what's happening in the political zeitgeist in America.
A question from the audience is, do you think everything, and I imagine they mean this divide and this tumult that we seem to be in, do you think everything traces back to a history of racism in our country?
It's the original sin in America. Most of the people I talked to in the film, it didn't even depend on what side they were on in the divide. Everybody freely talks about the fact that if there's any single thing we have to do in the country, it's address race and our own blindness about it. That it is pernicious, that it is at the heart of everything that's going on, and that it must be fixed.
Another question from the audience. What are the challenges of producing and putting a documentary like this out there, I imagine, at this time? I mean, you know, Frontline and your work, to a point, has been on time, what's happening, and always sort of in the midst of the chaos.
Right.
What's that like? How do you live through that when you're always living it as it seems to be happening?
As one person in the film says, for places like CNN and other places, Donald Trump is a plane crash, always waiting to happen. It's that kind of a problem with him, the way that he approaches conflict and trouble. If he gets in a bind, he comes back out with something else. Covering that, deciding what matters in that, in the era of the single most important thing that comes out of our film, I think, about Donald Trump, which is the malleability of truth. How much truth is in play in this administration. Fake news. You and I are members of the gang called the Enemy of the People. It's for Americans who, as I said at the very beginning of our conversation, used to be able to at least come to an agreement about something. Now, they don't trust, if you don't trust information, if you don't trust what you hear, if you can't forget even whether it's from legitimate journalists or not, but from talk radio, from the newspapers or the websites you read or every place else you go, if the truth, whatever the truth is, can't be agreed upon, citizens are afloat. And who do they believe? Maybe what they're hearing is from the Russians, especially going into an election year. That's the thing that into that environment, you try to make a piece of big, serious journalism that, thank God, public television, Frontline, and WGBH allow us to do.
Do you think there's an opportunity to push and promote the idea of a healthy skepticism instead of an unhealthy suspicion? You know, I think, as you know, being a reporter and a journalist, we always get teased when something happens, and I'll, raise my eyebrow and go, I don't know, that's exactly what happened. You don't trust anything. I said, no, it's not that I don't trust anything. I'm just skeptical. I have a natural curiosity. I'm skeptical to see if what happened is really what happened. And then if I think it is, I think I'm okay to buy in on that, which is different from being suspicious and untrustworthy or distrustful of the media, which I think is where we are right now. Is there anything we can do to promote that?
Well, if you're fortunate enough, like I am, to be able to step back on big issues all your life, really big things like the divide that's happening right before us, and your first impulse, because this is what you do for a living, is to be skeptical. You learn, if you've got the time to go back and think about it, roll it around, interview the people who really know, get access into the stock footage and everything in the historical perspective, that your initial skepticism may be validated, but it may be too that you step back and you say, oh, wait a minute, this is what this really means. Oh, wait a minute, it felt that way at the time, but if I hook that to this, and I interview that person and they connect it for me, I've now made sense of something that my initial reaction was one way. I've tested it, I've laid it out, and if I land there again, well, that's a fair way to go.
And the test part is the important part, the looking for information that it may not be in your bubble. Right?
And you have to, because you have, if you're doing this right and you get to do it, and it's a real responsibility to get it right and to be as fair as you possibly can. You're going to make mistakes, but they're not going to be mistakes that are born out of your bias. There'll be mistakes that somebody didn't tell you, somebody lied to you, you didn't really know, you could never find out, and you took a flyer with it, things we don't ever do anymore. But you are always testing everything you do to the full extent you can. The number of fact checks before I can get my film on the air through lawyers and people who just are literally challenging every single fact and things that might lead to facts is unbelievable to get a big project like this on the broadcast.
I was in my car when I heard you on with my colleagues, Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. I think last week you were on the radio with them. And I didn't know it was you when I tuned in, because I tuned in the middle. And I was, as the interview was coming to a close, I was feeling this depression, you know, this lack of optimistic spirit that America is known for. And I'm going to ask you the same question that Jim asked you, even though I said it before we went on the air here. I wasn't going to do that because your answer was, I think, so perfect for the times. Are you pessimistic right now, you know, or are you optimistic?
I'm worried, deeply and profoundly worried. I'm worried about the truth that I talked about. I'm worried about the distance that people find themselves in. I'm worried as we face this election, both in the Senate and in the House and for the presidency. I mean, I'm extremely concerned, and I don't know, and I'm worried on behalf of the young people who have to pick up the mess after we all move on. I'm worried about the implications of everything, both sides. But in the end, it's going to be up to people to decide. They're going to go to the ballot box in November, and they can decide to wipe the slate clean. They can decide that's enough of that. It was very valuable for him to come in and Trump to come in and wreck Washington. Maybe that was a necessary cleansing.
Maybe a fever.
Or let's, break the fever, or let's do some more of that because it's actually working, and yes, it's a tough time now. Whatever the people decide, if they have the benefit of the truth. But what are the Russians going to do this year? What other forces are at work already tempering and manipulating what you know from Facebook, from Instagram, from all of the other ways you get your information? This is the mining of the division in America by outside forces, and our own internal forces is the scariest thing I've ever faced as both a political reporter and as a citizen.
So I'm going to make you say it just so we're on a positive note. You're a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist?
I have to be.
Okay.
I mean, I make films. I have to believe I'm going to continue to be able to make films in a free country. And that is something that hasn't been taken away yet.
Great. Micheal Kirk, it's so great to meet you and chat with you. I hope we get the opportunity again. Congratulations on these great films, America's Great Divide from Obama to Trump. You can watch it on all of our streaming platforms, and please make sure you watch it before you vote. And just from a historical perspective, great filmmaking as always. Thanks so much for coming in. Thank you for watching. Thanks for being at the Newsfeed Cafe at the Boston Public Library. I'm Sue O'Connell. I will be back again here next Thursday, and let's see what magic guest we have for you here next Thursday. Oh, this is so exciting. We're going to talk with the folks from NOVA about the polar extremes. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course always at WGBH.org. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.